Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from for this community session. Welcome to the show. I'm Lavanya. I'm the product manager lead on the analytics on the Intune team. And I'm going to pass it over to David, who is here joining me along with Zach. Over to you, David.
Hey guys, my name is David Alessi. I am the product manager in charge of Intune reporting, as well as a couple other data platform and sort of data infrastructure projects over here on the Intune team. Zach?
Hey there, my name is Zach Dvorak, product manager, also on the Intune team. Specifically, I spend most of my time thinking about analytics scenarios, data insights, and just generally, how do we help data work for you in the Intune portal?
All right. So with that, why don't we quick start this session? And we have the first session here from Sebastian. And I'm going to take a minute to look at this. At the moment, there are several types of reports in Intune admin portal. What is the plan? Will every single report be converted to the newest report view? By the way, what is the actual newest report view? The reports in Intune admin center below reports. David, do you want to take this
Yep, I
question?
can definitely take that one. So yeah, there are a bunch of different report types in Intune. There's a bunch of different ways to get to Intune data. The two that are sort of most visible in the console are, obviously the one is what you mentioned, the reports node there under the console, and then there's also a lot of reports sort of buried under monitoring. So if you were to go into all devices and then monitoring, or apps and monitoring, so on and so forth, there are a lot of reports under there as well. That's kind of how we separate our reporting sort of conceptually, where we have operational reports, which are more tactical, more focused on troubleshooting things that have gone wrong, fixing broken things. Those are all tucked away under monitoring. So it's kind of more in line with what you're doing. Whereas the reports node are what we call organizational reports, which are bigger picture, good stuff and bad stuff, tenant-wide information, aggregations, just sort of a broader picture, and not just focus on like a specific problem or a specific thing that you're trying to troubleshoot, that sort of thing. Both of those places are, kind of going to continue being used. I wouldn't say one is more up to date than the other. The big kind of migration that we hear, that I guess you guys probably hear us talking about, is the reporting v2 migration. And this affects reports in both places. So there are plenty of reports in, under monitoring that are v2, also some still on v1. I would say we're about 70%, maybe a little bit higher than that in terms of the number of reports in Intune that have been migrated to v2. I think there's about 115 reports in Intune last time I counted. And so we're making our way through those. Most of them are on v2 already. And most of the ones that you guys use every day are on v2 already. There's still a few left to go, but those are the sort of lesser used reports. And they'll continue to go into monitoring or under reports, just depending on sort of how the report is structured, and if it's sort of fits more into that organizational view or into the operational view.
Thank you, David. I think that's a good clarity into the number of reports that's moved into V2. And if there are more questions related to reporting, I think folks can always use the aka.ms/Intune feedback. Moving to the next question, and I think this is a question that any of us could take, and this is from Terry. Thank you, Terry. How can we grab model and serial numbers of accessories like the dock and monitors a user is using within Intune reporting? If not in Tune, is there an alternative non-native method to pull that data? David, do you want to get started with the reporting part of it, and then we talk about the data? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, when we're talking about sort of the Intune data pipeline, there's usually starts on the device, not always, but kind of a general example here, starts on a device or perhaps an application that's Intune managed. So for an Intune managed thing, whatever that thing is, be it an app or a device, we can then get data off of that object and then pipe it into Intune and then get it to you guys through reports. When it's something like a monitor, that's not really Intune manageable, at least not most monitors that I'm familiar with, or a dock. There just isn't really a way to pull that sort of data into Intune because it's not it's on an Intune device or object. So I'm not exactly sure how Intune would be able to do that. We've heard some inventory asset management type requests in the past from customers, but this is probably the first I've heard about, things like docks and monitors that just aren't Intune managed at all. I'll take a note, but it's nothing that we can do today.
And that kind of falls into the peripherals also, right? Accessories and peripherals is kind of how I look at it. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of building on top of that, to David's point, think accessories like docks and monitors aren't objects that get enrolled in Intune. So it's not something that we're going to be able to natively report on in terms of, you're not going to be able to get a data table of the docks in your environment. That said, if we zoom out a little bit, one of the things that we think a lot about is just general data retrieval from your managed objects. So whether that's a device or a user, any of those assets that can be enrolled into Intune, if you have a sort of a consistent accessory to Intune object mapping, for instance, there's a specific dock or a monitor assigned to a particular user, then that could potentially be something where, when we think about retrieving data from the device, in the future, we may have scenarios that allow you to capture some of that data. But if we're talking more from like a shared asset scenario where, if you have hot desks in the office and any user can come sit down and plug into that dock, that kind of falls more along the lines of an asset management scenario, which I think is largely out of the scope of Intune today, but definitely good feedback. I'd love to hear more from you, Terry, about, what specific scenario you have in mind. And, we're obviously happy to take the feedback, and then we can also kind of help you brainstorm potential ideas or things that might work for you.
David, do you have your coffee ready? I have more reporting coming your way. Okay.
I'm ready to go.
The next question is from Ronan. Do you think that Intune can automate a query to export the data view for all users that have an error to log on? After like 3 errors, have a warning in the report view and email the IT team every week with an export in PDF format, like an automated action and an automated trigger to send the email is kind of how I'm thinking about it, David.
Right. Yeah. So I've heard similar feedback in the past. There are some sort of orchestration type requests we've gotten from customers, and is definitely something that we're thinking about as a product. A lot of conversations, a lot of work going on around, how we can enable these types of things in the future. As far as what Intune could do today, definitely not this sort of automated thing. The kind of automation that you'll get from Intune today is more around, I see customers using our APIs to get fresh pulls of data on some sort of schedule. Usually most customers do maybe daily or twice daily. There's certain features like log analytics or data warehouse where there's sort of automatically refresh data coming in there that can then be piped out into reports. Most customers take this data and put it into Power BI. That's sort of the final destination. And then these reports kind of get refreshed, as per whatever schedule Power BI is configured to refresh with. But as far as like sending an email or something like that's not something that we can do today. But it is just sort of the general concept of, some things happening, trigger events via orchestration. These are top of mind for us in the Intune team, and we're having these conversations all the time. I can't really give you guys a lot of details because it's still so early in the development cycle, but we've heard this customer feedback before, and we're super interested in seeing what we can do to deliver this type of scenario.
That's helpful, David. And actually, before we take the next question, do you think it would be helpful to talk about some new features that you're thinking about from a reporting perspective? Because I think that can help answer some of the follow-up questions that is coming our way.
Right. Yeah. So when we talk about reporting, there's a couple of sort of things that we're looking at the top of our priority list. The first one is I already mentioned it, reporting V2. Like I said, there's about 115 reports in Intune today. And step one is just getting them all on the same platform. I know a lot of you folks have probably noticed that, there's certain situations where you look in one report and it says one thing, and you look at another report and it's inconsistent with the first one. That's the main problem we're solving with Reporting V2. Reporting V2, there's a ton of engineering effort going into, when one value is updated in one report in V2, that value then gets also updated in every single report across the entire system. So it should get rid of the vast majority of these inconsistency issues. There's still a couple that are sort of more UI related, where the UI is just kind of unclear, that we're also going to go and fix. But Reporting V2 is a big concern for us. And then even beyond Reporting V2, there's still a lot of things in the console that we're not happy with. We want to do more with filtering. We want to enable customers to slice and dice the data at a much deeper level than you can do today. The filters are really lacking. I hear that feedback all the time. So we have some work planned in the coming sprints to improve these sort of in-console experiences as well. And then, of course, we're also investing in export. Lots of customers take data out of Intune, whether it be via data warehouse, log analytics, or, like I mentioned before, exporting directly out of the APIs. Tons of customers do this stuff, get that data into Power BI. We want to get more data for you guys to export. We want to make it easier so that you don't have to write a script to pull from APIs. These are big priorities for us that we've heard from a lot of customers. I don't have any super detailed stuff I can share with you guys right now, but these are the problems that we've identified and the things that we want to do a better job of in the future.
Awesome. That's exciting to know. David, why don't we ensure Zach has his share of coffee now before we get to the next reporting question? Zach, I think it is helpful because kind of teeing in onto Ronan's question, right? We do have the anomaly detection feature and the device correlation that's available in the advanced endpoint analytics. Should we talk a little more about it and what it does before we take more questions on reporting? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So and this kind of goes back to David's point where, we do have sort of elements that speak to Ronan's question here within Intune today. And then kind of the way that we're thinking about things into the future is, how do we wire all of this together for you in more of an end-to-end automated way? And so just to kind of speak to a few of those elements that currently exist, Lavanya alluded to our anomaly detection feature within the advanced endpoint analytics solution. This is essentially where, instead of forcing you to realize, hey, there's a problem here or something doesn't seem right, we are looking through all of the signals that your devices are reporting back and trying to tease out any sort of patterns that seem out of place or any sort of unexpected behavior that may constitute an issue that you might want to drill into. So, for instance, do we see a spike in blue screens on a subset of your devices? Is there a particular application that started crashing more frequently than normal? Things along those lines. And so we'll bubble that up to you as what we call an anomaly. And then from there, you can drill in and try to understand, what is the common thread here? Is this issue more prevalent on a specific type of device or on devices with a certain characteristic, certain driver, certain application installed? And so we help you identify those cohorts of impacted devices so that you can troubleshoot and remediate the issue more tactically. Also along those lines, part of your question here was, after a certain number of errors, can we have some sort of a warning in the report view? And that really is kind of the way that we're approaching the anomaly detection scenarios within endpoint analytics. We don't want to bubble up anything and everything to you. We don't want it to be so noisy that it becomes a chore having to go through all of these anomalies. So we have several different statistical models that we're using. If you check out the Microsoft Learn page for Advanced Endpoint Analytics, we walk you through what some of those models are. But the idea is, these are threshold-based heuristics where we only are going to bubble up the anomaly to you if it's something that we believe is worth your time to go investigate. So it can kind of help you cut through some of that noise there and focus specifically on the things that really matter. And then in the context of some of your existing tools that you may be using, we're looking into things like integration with tools like ServiceNow or support platforms So that way you can either automatically log support tickets when these types of anomalies occur, or if you have a report from your support team about a particular problem, you can work to correlate that back to some of the events that are being reported in through endpoint analytics. So really, we're taking a holistic look at some of these existing features, and we're thinking about how do we wire this up into a more cohesive end-to-end experience for you, and really help you with that troubleshooting and remediation process.
That's great, Zach. And I think that kind of gives our audience an insight into what the anomaly detection feature is and how we are thinking about it more end to end. So thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next question. And again, for folks who want to understand more about what endpoint analytics does, you can look at the aka.ms/eadocs URL. Why don't I move on to the next question from Anthony? How about app reporting? I deployed an Acrobat update yesterday to a device group, and when I click on device status, I still see each user status on shared devices. So instead of 500 devices, I see status for 1,000 different users. It's hard to filter out what is going on with that extra noise. And
Yeah.
probably, David,
No,
you
that's funny.
already have the answer ready.
Yeah. It's it is a big issue. So just as far as app reporting in general, it is something that we're invested in improving. If we look at our telemetry, app reports are generally the number one, and it's not even close as far as the number of time people open those reports. So obviously it's super important to you guys, so it's important to us, and we are actively working on a lot of improvements to app reporting, app inventory, collecting more data about apps, and all that sort of thing. So it's definitely top of mind for us. So that's just good in a general sense. For this particular issue, it is a tough one to sort of solve, because you could have a situation where you deploy an app to a shared device, and one of the users just logged on and got the update. Another user hasn't logged on, hasn't got the update. So as far as reporting sort of on a per device basis, which is it? Is it the lowest common denominator, or is it if anyone on the device got the correct app update? We see similar problems for policy as well, right? You deploy a policy, it gets updated. One user just logged in and got the update, but this other guy hasn't logged in since last week and doesn't have the update. So what do you report? It's difficult from that perspective. So I'll say in general, we're improving app reporting. For this particular issue, it's a tough one to solve. If you have an expectation of how you would like that data displayed, because again, just considering it's kind of a complicated scenario and there isn't really a right or wrong answer, definitely let us know. I suppose I could put my email in the chat if the studio thinks that's okay, but I'm happy to hear from Anthony how you would expect that to work, how we can improve that, because it is one of those where it's tough to make everyone happy, because it's just a complicated situation to display in a report.
And I will say, just to kind of build on top of David's answer there, as he mentioned, this is something that we are, actively having conversations on, and how do we sort of evolve app reporting. David and I have been talking about this quite a bit lately. But one of the things to think about is, we do have some different reports within Intune based on the specific question you're looking to answer, right? So when in the question here, you say something about, you're looking to see the device status. And so in that case, there's a report within Intune called Discovered Apps, where you can see installation status of a particular app on a particular device. And then we also have the views that I think you're alluding to in your question here, which are more of the assignment status views, where you have attempted to assign an application to a particular group, and then you're able to monitor the status of that particular assignment. Was it successful? Was there a failure? That sort of thing. And so it's kind of a weird nuance there, where the deployment action is reported on, and then we also have the reporting on which apps are discovered or installed on a particular device. And so, both questions, I think, can be valuable depending on what it is you're trying to drill into, but definitely something that we as the Intune team are thinking a lot about, because we definitely do hear a lot of feedback in this area in terms of wanting super crisp, detailed information about applications on devices.
Totally. And I think I'm just going to do a little bit of PSA here. If there are more questions that you want to bring in after the end of the session, you can contact us via the DM on the tech community, and we'll continue to roll into the next set of questions. And this is a question from Jake. How can device compliance and encryption status be pulled into log analytics? Before we take that question, Zach, I know we've been thinking about some additional signals that we are exploring to bring into anomaly detection feature based on various customer conversation. Do you want to touch upon a little about it, and then we can get to the question from Jake? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I can touch on it in the context of this question to some extent.
Perfect. Go for
So
it.
let me try that. So I think just to reiterate, the question here was, how can we bring things like device compliance and encryption status into log analytics? And the question I would ask back to you there is, why are you looking to bring that data into log analytics? I'd like to understand the sort of the end goal there in terms of, are we trying to identify cases where devices have become non-compliant? Are we trying to, look for changes? Is this just an auditing process? Like, what's the end goal with bringing that data in? Because the way that we are thinking about our endpoint analytics features is really in the context of sort of that next step, right? So instead of reporting on the raw data, like this device compliant, not compliant, or this device encrypted, not encrypted, we're looking at anomalies or unexpected changes. So did a subset of your devices suddenly flip from compliant to non-compliant around the same time? And what was the reason for that? Why did they go out of compliance? How do we get them back into compliance? Is there a subset of your devices where a disk is not encrypted when it should be, right? And so we're trying to sort of up-level the question to some extent to give you a signal about things that might be off or things that might have gone wrong, instead of just reporting on that raw data. And so that's kind of the way that we're thinking about anomaly detection and a lot of the work that we're doing in the endpoint analytics space. So like I said, I'd love to hear more from you, Jake, in terms of, what's the next step with bringing this data into log analytics, and how can we, help short circuit that process a little bit? And how can we help you, jump ahead a step and get to the information that you're really looking for with our tools?
Thank you, Zach. I think that's a great point. And Jake, if you are able to share more of your thinking in the chat, we will continue to look for your inputs there. Again, I think now we have another question, and I am going to first apologize just in case I'm not saying your name right. I think it's Constantinos. Would it be possible in the near future to get some kind of reporting as sysadmins the moment devices are enrolled or unenrolled in Intune, so that we can have an easier control in terms of what's going on and monitor that devices stay managed and compliant within our company? Currently, it's mostly a hit or miss situation where it is not clear if a user has gone ahead and removed the company device management. Thank you. Any
Gotcha. Okay.
takers?
Yeah, I can definitely take a stab at this. So I guess there's sort of two angles to this. I guess one is, some kind of report that gives you, a record. You can go and look at it and see an audit of everyone who's removed managed from their device, unenrolled a device, so on and so forth. I've definitely heard that feedback before. And in fact, I know the enrollment team is aware of that. I spoke to them about that a few months ago. Probably need to check in with them to see what they're currently thinking or working on. But I do know they're aware of this sort of requirement. As far as the sort of next step after that, I guess I would like to know sort of, is there a risk that we're concerned about here, with compliance and conditional access? If it's set up correctly, as soon as that user unenrolls, corporate data has gone off the device, and they won't have any further access to corporate data. So they won't really be able to do much with that device. So, is there an additional concern beyond that? Why, what are you going to use this report for? What are the sort of business processes that this is going to empower? I would love to have some more information on that. So yeah, like Lavanya said, either follow up in the chat or DM us. on Tech Community, I'll definitely make sure to check my DMs after this. Yeah, so enrollment team is aware. Compliance probably saves you from most of the big issues here. And then if there's additional stuff, please let us know.
And David, do you have any other feedback that you have recently received around reporting that we are actively working on? Do you want to tie in some of the feedback and share how we are thinking about it more in context of Intune as a product, and how we are thinking about the whole reporting V2 as we are looking at migrating to V2?
Yeah, so one of the things that the V2 migration empowers is it enables us to kind of do more interesting things with the data. It's probably not a surprise that reporting V1 is kind of older infrastructure and reporting V2 is newer infrastructure. So that just sort of opens up a lot of opportunities to do interesting things. There was already a log analytics question. I really like log analytics and how you kind of have that data at your fingertips. You can write your own queries and all that sort of thing. Lots of customers love this experience, especially a lot of the config man customers who are used to, your SQL DB and having all that data there. We've heard this request all the time. So I definitely hear that. I'm a data guy too, so I enjoy that as well. We want to enable you guys to do more of that. I can't really share a lot because it's still so early in development. But I can say if you like, writing your own queries and having data at your fingertips and just being, sort of having this sort of flexible data interface, definitely stay tuned for the next year or so. There's going to be a lot of really exciting things coming to Intune.
Great. All right. Moving on to the next question from Saba. Do you plan to add more reporting features on disk encryption? Oh, that's an interesting one. Currently, encryption report won't tell you which method used to encrypt the devices, just that it's encrypted. But I won't be able to get the info around the encryption methodology itself. I don't know if either of you have more insights into this,
Interesting.
and how our core team is thinking about it. Zach, looks like
I
you
mean,
have something to share.
So I don't have a specific answer for you in the context of disk encryption, but what I can say is that one of the things that the team is thinking a lot about is along the lines of custom inventory, right? So if you have certain device properties or variables that are important to you and specific to your business, we're thinking about how do we enable you to collect that data, report on that data, audit that data within your environment. So can't speak to whether we have specific native properties related to disk encryption that are coming or anything like that, but definitely this idea of custom inventory, an example being disk encryption is important to you, is something that is very top of mind and that the team is investigating.
Got it. And I would also say that Joey apparently is reading our mind because he's talking about some natural language interface. I must say that in the whole generative AI era, as we are all thinking about, oh, how can we do something with the LLM models behind the scene? One of the things that we definitely are getting as a major feedback from our customers is natural language to KQL translation, and it kind of resonates with the suggestion from Joey. What about considering creating a natural language interface for Intune reporting? Something like show me all devices that are not compliant, or show me all devices that do not have secure boot and BitLocker enabled. And I think this resonates very well into being able to give control to our customers for custom queries and what we can do with it. I think that's a very powerful feature that kind of not just leaves you with an option to use what is available from the existing reporting perspective, but also giving you an opportunity to be the driver and provide your own custom queries. Definitely, this is top of mind. We've been thinking about it. So yeah, stay tuned to hear more about it, and we love for such suggestions. All right, why don't we roll into the next question from Dylan? Is there a report that allows me to see all apps assigned to a specific group instead of having to go to each app and check the assignments?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, most of our reports are sort of from the app's perspective or from the sort of deployments perspective. So you can go from kind of like the app or the deployment, to the list of groups, but we don't currently have much reporting at all from kind of the other direction where you start with the group and then look at that resultant set. I've definitely heard that feedback from customers to sort of get a better idea of, especially from a troubleshooting context of, users in this group are having a problem. Can I get a list of everything targeted to this group or whatever? So I've definitely heard that before. It's not something that we have today, unfortunately.
Yeah,
and I would, just to kind of build on to that answer, I'd love to hear from you, Dylan, if this is something that you are truly looking to evaluate at the group level in terms of, let me see all of the apps that are explicitly assigned to this particular group, or is it more of a resultant set of policies evaluation in terms of, for this particular device or for this particular set of devices, what are all of the apps assigned to them, regardless of whether it's explicitly assigned to this particular group or perhaps a different group that also happens to contain these devices, if that makes sense, right? So I'd love to hear what scenario you have in mind there, but definitely good feedback.
Yeah, and as we think more about the tenant level exploration or even fleet of device exploration, I think this becomes very relevant. So, Dylan, I think what would be important for us as we are thinking through this tenant level investigation and analysis, understanding how you are looking at the groups and what that mapping means would be an useful insight for us. All right. Looks like we have more questions. Let me look at the next question from Rupert. We have various issues with devices taking ages, hours to and check in after on is active. Hold on. For whatever reason, I am not able to see the last part. Let me just take a relook at it.
I can see it here.
Thank you, David.
Check in after and is active fail, respond to wipe reset commands. Is there a report on device check-in performance? No, there isn't a report on that today. It is, a challenge just with any sort of device management software where, if the device is off or not responsive or not connected to a network, we're just sort of out of luck at that point. Of course, we make a great effort to contact these devices, but there's definitely situations where the device is simply in a cabinet and off, and there's not much that can be done. So it is a challenge with any sort of device management suite, and we don't have any sort of check-in performance reporting per se.
Now, the piece that we do have, right, is at the device level, you can see the last check-in time, right? And so that kind of, that can kind of help you understand if it's a situation like what David's describing, where, maybe the user went on vacation, or maybe that device is just, locked in a drawer somewhere. So you can see the last check-in time for a device. One of the other pieces that has been top of mind over the past several months is, sort of real-time actions or real-time querying of a device. And so one thing you might have seen recently, we not long ago did a little bit of a rebrand and we moved our proactive remediations feature, which used to exist under endpoint analytics. Now it's just called remediations and exists under the devices node. We also added the ability to push a remediation to a specific device on demand. And so that's an option that you have where if there is an action that you're trying to take on a particular device, or you want a specific script to run on a device immediately, you can use that run remediation feature to push that script or trigger that script to execute on the device, as requested. Now, of course, same conditions apply in terms of device has to be on, device has to be connected to a network. Obviously, we can't get that script to the device if those conditions aren't met, but that is a way to sort of trigger that action right away, as opposed to needing to wait for a next check-in or anything along those lines.
Thank you, Zach. Actually, I'm going to take the next question just so that you both can sip onto your coffee. This is a question from Fred. Is there a more efficient way to expose anomalies such as Windows features update, for example, Windows devices that are supposed to be migrated and haven't, and reasons why? For instance, device has a policy blocking the upgrade or device doesn't meet requirements. So this is kind of very much aligned to how we are thinking about the anomaly detection feature and the end-to-end workflow, wherein we at this point in time are at the stage where we have been able to get the right kind of ML behind the scenes to help identify the anomalies, and we are able to cut through a lot of noise and just surface anomalies that are relevant. One step further into this workflow is where we are now at this point in time doing all the needed device correlation and potentially bringing in some of the attributes that could have contributed to the anomalies. As a follow up, next step is where we talk about the recommendation for remediations, right? And how is this kind of helping answer Fred's question is we eventually are looking at being able to proactively identify the devices that could potentially have these anomalies, right? Which is where we will be able to tell you what are those X number of devices that would in future have a similar such anomaly for the reasons which could be related to policies blocking the upgrade, or it could even be as basic as the device hardware configurations not meeting the needed requirements, right? It could be any of those. And if you want to understand more in terms of what is already available with regard to the feature, please go to aka.ms/intune/anomaly detection, and you will be able to find more about the models that we are using behind the scenes. But then, as part of the end-to-end workflow, alerting feature and keeping the personas informed about the core anomalies that they need to take action upon are something that we are actively working towards, and we will keep you posted in upcoming forums.
I'll also say, specifically in the context of Windows feature updates, which was the specific ask within the question there, we have done a lot of work in recent months in terms of feature update reporting. So I'd encourage you to check out under the reports section of Intune. We have both proactive reports around feature updates in terms of any blocking issues or compatibility risks, any hardware requirements that aren't met on your devices. So you can get a sense ahead of time of whether the Windows update is likely to be successful or run into issues, as well as the more reactive reporting. So once the deferral period has been reached, once that update has been triggered, getting the status on was it successful, were there any issues along those lines. So definitely encourage you to check out the work that's been done in the feature update area as well.
Thanks for that additional insight, Zach. All right, next question from Jamie. Tenant Attach has extended our ability to do ad hoc scripting and reports against devices from Intune, but currently we can only do that against single devices. Will this ever be extended to groups?
I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard this feedback before, although I guess it seems pretty straightforward. Yeah, I'm not aware of any plans to do this. That's something I'll need to follow up on.
Sure.
Yeah, I just kind of like I could give you a more precise answer if I knew specifically, what you were thinking about in the context of Tenant Attach there. In terms of being able to take action on devices, for instance, we talked a little bit about remediations a minute ago, where you can trigger an ad hoc script on a particular device. That's currently not something that you can do in a one-to-many way. You can't trigger that action on a group of devices, but certainly something that we've heard feedback on and that we're looking into. In terms of, you say, reports against devices, so in terms of like data retrieval and that sort of thing, also something we've heard feedback on in terms of being able to query a group of devices in an ad hoc way. Nothing we have that is available today or will be available imminently, but would definitely love to hear your feedback in that area as we continue to think about that space and continue to hear feedback about ad hoc scripting, reporting, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And if you have more thoughts, do send your feedback to us via aka.ms/Intune feedback. And with that, I'm going to move to the next suggestion from Sigurd. Hey, Sigurd, nice to see you on this community live. What about RBAC for reporting by default? So Intune rules with access only to a subset of devices flagged by a specific tag see only what they are allowed to see in reports, like in advanced analytics with unlimited number of supported tags. I think that's a great suggestion. Zach, I know we have thought through quite a bit about these tags and brought in support within advanced EA. Do you want to share more about it? And David, kind of double clicking on that further to understand how we are thinking about the RBAC model from a reporting standpoint.
Yeah, sure. So it's a really good question. This is a super important topic, especially for a lot of our larger, more distributed customers, where we might have multiple subsidiaries operating within the same tenant, or just multiple different IT groups. So, in terms of RBAC for reporting, one of the things that we've enabled for reports within Endpoint Analytics is if you as an admin have limited access to the devices within Intune, the Endpoint Analytics reports at the device level. So things like when you go to the device performance page, you'll only be able to see data for the devices that are in scope for you. So your set of devices that you have access to or you have permissions for is the set of devices that will appear in those Endpoint Analytics reports for you. Now, there's typically a question at the next level that says, all right, well, I have multiple scope tags, or I have multiple different groups of devices that I have access to, and I would like to slice these reports based on each specific group or each scope tag. So for instance, I'm the IT pro for Europe, and I need to be able to slice by country so that I can see Germany devices, I can see France devices, etc. And that is something that is available as part of our advanced analytics tool. This is what we call custom device scopes. And so the way that works is you configure these in advance because it does require quite a bit of pre-computation. It's essentially going to be a tenant within a tenant experience where you're able to see all of the insights, all of the scores, everything within Endpoint Analytics is going to be recomputed in the context of that smaller subset of devices. And so if you configure these custom device scopes, you'll be able to slice and dice your Endpoint Analytics reports by those more granular subsets of devices based on your scope tags. So definitely something that we've invested very heavily in. We've released quite a bit within the last year or so along these lines. So if there are specific scenarios that you feel like we haven't gotten to yet, or if you have thoughts on what works or doesn't work for you in what we've already released, we're all ears. We'd love to hear from you.
Right, and just to tackle that from a sort of general reporting standpoint, every report on Reporting V2 supports scope tags in RBAC by default. That's another big reason that we're doing migration, is just that we can get universal support. It's a requirement for any report in Intune to meet those standards. And then I've also heard the request from a lot of customers to sort of allow more explicit scope tag filtering. So just like Zach said, I've heard it on the reporting side as well, where you're the admin for, maybe the global company and you just want to slice to a country or a region or whatever. So, you have all scope tag access and you want a subset of that for whatever your current task is, and allow that sort of like in a filter in the reports. Heard that request a lot. So that is something that we're looking to add, but I don't have any dates on that or anything like that. But it's something that we're aware of and want to add at some point, but it's we're not quite there.
And this also is a good opportunity to kind of highlight the difference between filtering and slicing. We keep throwing this word slicing out, but just to kind of explain the distinction there, what we mean. When we talk about filtering, we're talking about taking a list of data, like a device report, for instance, and then restricting that view to only devices that meet a certain criteria. So when we think about a scope tag as a device property, filtering would be removing devices from the report that don't have that particular property in question. So if you wanted to filter based on a scope tag, we would only show you the devices that meet that criteria. Slicing takes that a step further, where we will continue to restrict the view to only the devices that are in scope for that slice, but it also involves the recomputation of insights and aggregates. So when we talk about aggregate metrics, a lot of which you'll see in endpoint analytics, things like, average boot time across your devices, things like your application reliability score. Those are things that need to be recomputed when we restrict the view to a subset of devices. And so when we talk about slicing, we're referring to all of that recomputation and the regeneration of the insights and the scores and the recommendations based on that smaller set of devices. So that's kind of the distinction there when we throw out the words filter versus slicing.
I'm glad you touched upon it because I was expecting a question on that. I'm going to change the order just a little bit since we were talking about EA, Zach. I think there is a question from Yusuf who would like to understand how can you get insights about cloud PCs from Intune? Do we want to talk about what is available within EA? And then we can go into the next question.
Sure thing. So I'll start by emphasizing that cloud PCs are PCs, right? So they can be managed in Intune, enrolled in Intune, just like a traditional physical PC. And so most of what exists within Intune is also available for your cloud PC devices. So definitely don't take what I'm about to say as these are the only things available for cloud PCs. You can still manage your cloud PCs in Intune. You can push policies. You can run scripts. You can see those devices within your endpoint analytics reports, as well as all of your other reports that we've been talking about. Now, there are also going to be a handful of features within Intune that are exclusive to cloud PCs that will provide you additional information and more granular details about properties, metrics, information that is uniquely relevant for cloud PCs. So the ones that Lavanya alluded to there, within endpoint analytics, we have a handful of reports. There's one called remoting connection, and there's one called resource performance. Those are going to be specific to cloud PC devices. So with remoting connection, you'll be able to see information about the access end users are having to their cloud PCs. So how long is it taking them to connect? What's that round trip time looking like? Is there any latency in the connection? So you can get a sense of how effective the cloud PC is for your end users. And then with the resource performance report, you're able to evaluate if your end users have an appropriately sized cloud PC. So you can see if they're experiencing a large number of CPU or RAM spikes. And if you're noticing patterns of spikes on specific devices, you can then upgrade those devices to give them more RAM, more CPU, generally just make the device more performant for that end user's workload. So those are going to be the reports that are unique to Cloud PC. And the Cloud PC team, of course, is continuing to build additional insights and additional reports to give you greater insight into your cloud PCs and really help you understand how some of those metrics are looking that are uniquely relevant for a virtual device or a cloud PC.
Thanks, Zach. And I want to ensure that we have time to get to the question from Mark. And I wish we had David here. And David Alisi must be wondering, why am I saying this? I'm talking about David Geyer. With reporting V2, will the driver update policy be specific to devices as opposed to the update? Currently, we have to go log analytics to get driver information per machine. Will we ever get a Windows update for business compliant report that shows percentage of compliance for all devices in WFP?
Yeah, I can take that.
Perfect.
Yeah. I've actually been working with David Geyer a bunch
Awesome.
for the last couple of weeks on a bunch of new Windows update reports. So for the second point, I think that keep an eye out. I think we're going to do some things to improve that situation. For the first one, I'll probably have to follow up with David Geyer, but just know that there's a ton of active work going on at the moment to build and improve a bunch of new Windows update reports. So it's something that's top of mind for us on the reporting team. And we are actively in discussions. I don't want to share exactly how everything's going to work because we're still sort of tweaking the design, but we're getting pretty close to locking that down, and then we'll let the devs take it and run with it. And so just keep an eye out. There's a lot of good stuff coming for Windows updates.
Thank you, David. So I should have said David meet David behind the scenes. All right.
Yeah, I work with Guy all the time. Yeah.
Lovely. We all love him. If anyone is interested in joining our customer connection program, then the URL for you is aka.ms/join CCP. All right, we are almost getting close to the end of our session. I just want to ensure that if there are more questions around any of the topics that we have spoken about with regard to reporting or analytics, feel free to use the DM and continue to ask more questions. We are going to keep track of the questions till I think end of the Friday. I'm sure the host will be able to help us with more of the specific timeline, but we will keep a track of those questions and ensure that you get all your answers. And if you want to troubleshoot device issues with Intune, you know where to go to. That's aka.ms/ama/troubleshoot Intune. Any last parting thoughts, Zach, David?
No, I appreciate everybody's questions today. We did talk quite a bit about endpoint analytics. So if you're interested in exploring that a little further, the AKA link for that is going to be aka.ms/endpoint analytics. So definitely encourage you to check that out. Other than that, I appreciate the questions. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you guys coming out, asking a lot of great questions, and I'll definitely keep an eye on the DMs today on Tech Community to see what else you guys have.
And any other URL you would like to share, David?
No, I mean, all the reporting docs and all that stuff is all pretty well known. I'm sure you guys are familiar. So
Love it. Thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation, an amazing set of questions from our customers. Thank you. Thank you from all the three of us out here in the studio. Until next time.